I've been a fan of the Saga franchise since the early 90s, although I didn't realize I was a fan until almost a decade later. For those who may not be aware, the franchise first came to the West in 1990 under the name Final Fantasy Legend, which was released for the Game Boy. As a huge Final Fantasy fan, I jumped at the chance to enjoy my favorite series on the go. At the time, I was a little surprised by how different the game played compared to the console Final Fantasy games. Years later, when I discovered that it was intended to be part of a completely different franchise, it all made sense. I can't remember exactly how I stumbled across Romancing SaGa 3, but I do remember instantly falling in love with the aesthetic, which had a similar look to Final Fantasy VI and the different storylines depending on which character you selected at the beginning of the game. I never wanted to play a game so badly. There was just one little problem. Square opted not to release the game in the West. This was part of what could almost be considered a tradition of Square not localizing great games in the US, despite it being an era where they were doing some of their best work. Not just Romancing SaGa, but Seiken Densetsu 3, or Secret of Mana 2, Bahamut Lagoon, and Final Fantasy V. At least they graced us with Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, right? While there were groups working to translate these games from Japanese to English, the patch for Romancing SaGa 3 in particular was not great. It seemed like the only way I would get to experience this game was to either learn Japanese or use a guide. Neither option appealed to me, so I just passed on the game altogether, something that ate at me for close to 20 years. Thankfully, Square finally deigned to gift us Romancing SaGa 3 in the US a mere 24 years after it was initially released in Japan, showing a level of benevolence not seen since they developed Mystic Quest. Now that the game is finally out, I thought I'd give the game my critical eye. We'll be splitting this up into two sections. The first will discuss the Switch port specifically, and the second portion will be about my impressions with the early and mid parts of the game. So let's take a look at the port first. It's no secret that Square Enix ports and remasters can be hit or miss. After doing a pretty good job with the PC and mobile ports of Final Fantasy 3 and 4, they released two of the worst ports in Final Fantasy 5 and 6. They also managed to butcher Chrono Trigger on both platforms. To say I was cautious of how this game would be treated would be an understatement. At least now I can finally say, it's great. It wouldn't be much of a stretch to say that this is what HD remakes of older RPGs should aspire to emulate. Nearly everything about the port and remaster is carefully crafted to preserve the aesthetic of the original while still making it look better and clearer on the new hardware. There isn't much in the way of game options, but honestly, not a lot of options are really needed. I do have two minor nitpicks to discuss. The first is the scroll speed for the text in battle. This is the text that lets you know what your abilities do. Even on the fastest setting, it feels like it's absolutely crawling. You could probably get yourself a snack and still not miss any new text. The other minor complaint I have is the adventurer log. It's a new addition to the game to help you keep track of quests, rumors, and other information that might be useful to you. While this is a nice new feature, I wish they had taken it just a bit further and made it like an actual quest log. Even as you complete missions and follow up on information, it will still show up in the log with no indication that it's no longer relevant to you. I can somewhat understand why they chose this option for their record keeping, as it probably seemed like a good compromise between forcing the player to write down all the information themselves or risk getting lost, while not completely holding the player's hand and encouraging them to explore and talk to everybody. I just think one simple change of putting finished quests in a separate section would have made it just a bit better. Like I said, very minor nitpicks. I feel like if that's the worst I have to say about a port, it was probably well done. The performance is solid, I haven't noticed any frame rate issues or anything of that sort. One feature I've already gotten use out of is the New Game Plus. Unlike other games that require you to finish the game once before starting out again with your previous levels and money, Romancing SaGa 3 allows you to start a New Game Plus whenever you feel like. This was great for dipping my toes into the early parts of each character's story without having to sink too much time into it. I don't really have too much else to say about the port itself. I feel like they did a great job, and I hope that if Square ever decides to do another 2D remaster of Final Fantasy V and VI, that they'll take what they did here and apply it to those games. Or remake them in the style of Octopath Traveler. That would work too. Now on to my first impressions of the game itself. Just starting out the game for the first time makes a strong impression. We're immediately presented with the choice of which of the 8 protagonists we want to play as. For most characters, this choice has the biggest effect on how the start of the game plays out for you, but it will also have an impact on you throughout the whole game. For example, selecting Monica as your main character, as I did, means that an entire city is completely blocked off for you. Getting to make such a defining choice at the very beginning of the game gives a glimpse of the freedom that's in store for us. In the few scenarios I played after the introduction, you're plopped out into the world with only a vague sense of direction and an entire world to explore. It's at this time that we're introduced to a concept that really stood out to me, an emphasis on exploration and conversation. Listening to the gossip and rumors in town is not only important for figuring out where to go next, but for actually unlocking new locations. It may not seem like much now, but having a reason to walk around town and talk to everybody in order to progress is something we don't see a lot of anymore. It was neat the first time I talked to a person in town and they mentioned a forest near town that was overrun with monsters, and now be able to see the forest on the world map and be able to travel there and take care of the monsters. During your travels, you'll also come across companions you can recruit to your cause. You're able to have up to 6 people travel with you at once, and 5 will participate in battles. If you get sick of a party member, you can ditch them at the local pub. Usually. The system is a bit cumbersome, as talking to a recruitable character with a full party can leave you with no indication that they can be added to the party. You will also have to travel back to where you originally found each party member to re-recruit them. While it is a bit clunky, having a wide variety of characters to add to the group gives you a lot of flexibility and options when it comes to party composition. Getting back to the open exploration aspect of the game, while it is largely to the game's credit, it does come with a few downsides. The game mostly tries to avoid sending you to places that are far above your group's abilities, but it does this in a way that isn't clear or intuitive. In fact, a lot of the game's systems and mechanics are obscured in such a way that there's still not really a consensus on how they work, as evidenced by all the bad advice I was given during my time streaming the game. Hint, you don't actually want to avoid every single battle that you can. Certain quests only open up based on the amount of HP your main character has or the average of your party. It's worth stressing again that nobody seems to be 100% sure how this works, but main character HP seems to be the most widely used and is consistent with my experience. We'll talk more about stats and combat in a bit, but for now just know that like every other JRPG, you'll need to fight to raise your HP, so you go to a town to talk to everybody and get all the information you can. You then raise your HP by an arbitrary amount and then talk to those same people again, only now one of them has a quest for you. It's not a deal breaker for me, but I do think it could have been handled better, and I could easily see it turning people off from the game. So now let's talk about combat. Combat works like a traditional turn-based RPG. You select your commands and then you and the enemy take turns attacking each other. Your attacks and skills will differ depending on which weapons you have equipped. As you use weapons in combat, you'll have a chance of learning a skill associated with that weapon. One small problem with this is that it interrupts whatever command you had selected for that round. Sometimes this works in your favor, like when a character learns a really powerful move and gets to use it without expending SP, which is your resource for using weapon skills in battle. Other times, your character will use an ability that goes completely against the strategy you devised for that round. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. You can also teach your characters magic, but it's expensive. Unlike a lot of other RPGs, your characters recover all their HP at the end of each battle. However, SP, MP, and LP are not restored after each fight. LP are life points that are reduced each time a character dies in battle. If a knocked out character is attacked again, they'll continue to lose life points until their total reaches 0. Once a character's life points run out, they can no longer be healed in battle and must be recruited again in the location you originally found them. If your main character runs out of LP, or if everyone in the party is knocked out, it's game over. At the end of the battle, you'll have a chance of raising your character's weapon or magic skills, HP, SP, or MP. These increases seemingly happen at random, but they are largely tied into the actions you take in battle. Want to raise your MP? Keep casting spells. Want to become better with axes? Keep using them in battle. This system allows for a great deal of customization, but it's not without its frustrations. For example, I had 2 characters I wanted to make into spellcasters. I started them on this path at roughly the same time, but after a couple hours, the amount of MP they had was drastically different. You're also unable to increase character stats like strength or intelligence. So if a character has low strength, trying to make them a fighter puts you at a severe disadvantage. That's not something you can really afford because this game can be very unforgiving. This is what happened when I accidentally wandered down one floor too far while exploring a dungeon. Oh, it only hit 1. Thus negating its entire Bye. Even with the shield increasing my defense a great deal, I was hit for 3 times my max HP. I personally find this extra sense of danger fun and compelling, but it does illustrate the fact that you probably won't want to intentionally put yourself at a disadvantage with suboptimal character builds. There's one other area where this game seems to show its age: a lack of tutorials. This was made painfully clear when I was ripped out of the core gameplay loop and into an army versus army battle. No explanation was given on how these battles worked, or even a hint of what would make for a winning strategy. Needless to say, this battle went exactly how you would expect. All of this is not to say that Romancing SaGa 3 is a bad game. It's not. I enjoyed my time with it greatly. For me, the positives far outweigh the negatives, but I could understand if certain aspects of the game were deal breakers for some people. If you're looking for a streamlined experience with clear direction and modern quality of life features, this is probably not the game for you. That said, if you find yourself longing for an old school RPG experience, I think there is a lot to love about Romancing SaGa 3. So those are my thoughts on the port and the game in general. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, consider giving it a like and subscribing, as those things really help me out. Also, let me know in the comments what you thought, or if you're planning on getting the game, or if you already own it and how you're enjoying it. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.